Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw. Poland's president vetoes a bill extending benefits to Ukrainian refugees. One of the move's consequences is cutting off Polish funding for Ukraine's access to Starlink. Another is Poland's diminishing moral standing as the first to help Ukraine in the ultimate time of need. We'll have more on this in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Kyiv and Budapest clash over key Russian pipeline. Migration pressure mounts on Poland's border with Belarus. And the crew of Eagle S could face hefty jail sentence for sabotage. We start off tonight with Poland and its standing among staunch allies of Ukraine. Poland was once the country's strongest supporter. Recently, however, the status has come into question. Have domestic politics taken such a turn that Poland is no longer the leader it once was? Randy Potts tries to answer this question in his report.
Former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki was the first political leader to recognize Ukraine's statehood in 1991, but he's now concerned Poland's support for Ukraine is flagging.
What worries me a little bit is when I hear that the Swedish Minister of Defense or Canadian are happy and that they could cooperate in military manufacturing with Ukrainians and learning from the skills the Ukrainians learned from the battlefield. And I think that would be also good if we could even tighten our military cooperation with Ukrainians as soon as possible.
In fact, despite current President Karol Nawrocki congratulating Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people on Sunday,
I am sincerely grateful to President of the Republic of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, for his congratulations on Ukraine's Independence Day.
Come Monday, he was vetoing a bill designed to help Ukrainians in Poland.
I believe that family benefits should only be granted to those Ukrainians who make the effort to work in Poland, the same with healthcare.
Nawrocki then doubled down on his criticism of Ukrainians throughout history, bringing up Ukrainian nationalist Stepan Bandera, who committed atrocities against Poles 80 years ago.
I believe this bill should clearly address Bandera and equate the Bandera symbol in the criminal code with symbols corresponding to German National Socialism, commonly known as Nazism, and Soviet communism.
While the rest of Europe is loudly offering to help Ukraine in its fight to preserve its borders, Polish politicians seem increasingly divided. Most NATO states sharing the long eastern border with Russia have so far expressed some willingness to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire is struck. The only country not open to the idea? Poland.
Poland does not intend to send troops on a mission to Ukraine after the war ends, but will be responsible for the logistical organization of aid to Ukraine, as well as for protecting the European-Russian and European-Belarusian borders, as these are Polish borders.
Reports late on Monday suggest the Polish president's decision to veto the bill extending current support for Ukraine means Warsaw also won't be able to continue paying for Ukraine's current Starlink subscription after October 1st.
With his decision regarding the Act on Assistance to the Citizens of Ukraine, Karol Nawrocki is effectively disconnecting Ukraine from the internet.
A local historian worries that this anti-Ukrainian sentiment won't end anytime soon.
These things are going to be deep-rooted in our history, it's going to be deep-rooted in politics, it's going to be deep-rooted in everything and anything, and it's just not going to go away, so we have to deal with it.
Poland is counted as a member of the Coalition of the Willing and has long been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. With Ukraine marking Independence Day this week, a reminder too that Poland was the first country to recognize its statehood.
What I promised to, at that time, the spokesman of the Verkhovna Rada, the head of the Ukrainian parliament in January 1991, that as soon as there would be a will of the people of Ukraine, Poland would be the first to approve it and recognize independence of Ukraine.
But even as Poland builds what is expected to be the biggest army in Europe, Its politicians seem less willing than other eastern flank nations to use that army to support Ukraine. Randy Potts, TVP World.
U.S. President Donald Trump has been working together with his administration to orchestrate an end to the war in Ukraine. To that end, Washington has re-entered a dialogue with Moscow. Vice President JD Vance spoke at length about possible concessions which the Kremlin says it's willing to make. Later, during a presser in the Oval Office, Trump was asked about his recent conversations with Russia's Vladimir Putin.
Number one, Europe is going to give them significant security guarantees, and they should, because they're right there. But we'll be involved from the standpoint of backup. We're going to help them. And I think if we get a deal, and I think we will, but if we get a deal, you're not going to, I don't believe you're going to have much of a problem. But we'll back it up, because I want to stop seeing people being killed.
I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. What they have conceded is the recognition that Ukraine will have territorial integrity after the war. They've recognized that they're not going to be able to install a puppet regime in Kyiv. That was, of course, a major demand at the beginning. And importantly, they've acknowledged that there is going to be some security guarantee to the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
For the third time this month, Ukraine has attacked a key pipeline which supplies Hungary and Slovakia with Russian crude oil. For Kyiv, it's a fair game, but for Budapest and Bratislava, it's big economic headache. Now let's go to Alex Cardier in Kyiv for the latest on this back and forth of the war of words involving Russia's most precious resource.
Well, this diplomatic ding-dong has rumbled on now. We've had a response from the Ukrainian foreign minister pushing back against the Hungarian foreign minister. Let's bring you to the start of this disagreement between the two countries. Of course, Ukrainians striking in Russia, hitting an oil pipeline that supplies oil to, amongst others, Hungary and Slovakia. We've seen the Hungarian foreign minister saying that was an attack on Hungary's energy security. President Zelensky was asked for his response. This is what he said.
We have always supported friendship between Ukraine and Hungary. And now the existence of druzhba, meaning friendship, depends on Hungary's position.
Now, following that comment from President Zelensky, we heard again from the Hungarian foreign minister saying that in recent days the attacks carried out by Ukraine against the pipeline are an attack on Hungary's energy supply. Now, this pipeline, to remind you, is in Russia, and yet the Hungarian foreign minister calling it an attack on Hungary's sovereignty, something I've seen with some irony here in Ukraine, because Hungary has been more warm, more supportive to Russia in the context of its invasion of Ukraine, which of course in and of itself completely violates Ukrainian sovereignty. But nevertheless, the Hungarian government doubling down, calling this a threat from President Zelensky. Now, there may be some domestic considerations here, some domestic issues at hand as to why the Hungarian government, and particularly Prime Minister Viktor Orban, may be choosing this path. My colleague Ola Żarek spoke to Istvan Hegedus, who's the chairman of the Ukrainian Europe Society, speaking about why Viktor Orban may be choosing this fight.
I think there is some sort of panic in the Hungarian government that the economic situation is not getting better. And if there is a shortage of oil or gas in Hungary during winter, the government might face an outrage in the Hungarian public. But at the moment, I think in reality, it's more a political fight and not an economic emergency, at least at the moment.
But of course, despite the contradiction in terms of Hungary talking about the value of sovereignty, despite it still buying the oil from Russia that finances this violation of Ukrainian sovereignty in the form of Russia's 3.5-year invasion of the country, there's also the fact that the Hungarian government will have to stop buying oil from Russia by the end of 2027 either way, as part of the European Union's plans to move away completely from Russian oil. Well, my colleague Klaudia Czerwinska was speaking to Katarina Barley, the Vice President of the European Parliament, about this very point and about Viktor Orban's behavior.
I think he's trying to get the best of both worlds. I think he is someone who does not really have an ideology. He only tries to benefit the most, as well politically as financially, from his actions. But I want to echo what you said. We have to distinguish Viktor Orban from the Hungarian people.
For now, it appears that it may have calmed down, but there will be pressure from the European Union on Budapest to calm this rhetoric, to stop this argument. Ukraine, for now, will continue, it says, targeting Russia's oil infrastructure. In Kyiv, I'm Alex Cadye for TVP World.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made a high-profile visit to Warsaw today, where he was invited to talks with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and President Karol Nawrocki. At the forefront of the discussions, defense and security cooperation. Diana Skaya reports from the presidential palace.
We're standing in front of the Polish presidential palace where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, on his first visit to Warsaw as Prime Minister, has just finished his meeting with Polish President Karol Nawrocki. Early Monday morning, the Canadian Prime Minister met his Polish counterpart, Premier Donald Tusk. The leaders say they've agreed to cooperate more closely in areas such as defense, aviation, cybersecurity, and clean energy, elevating their relations to a strategic partnership.
We are committed to maintaining the closest possible transatlantic ties. For us, cooperation between the U.S., Canada, and the EU, support for Ukraine, and a firm policy towards dictators and aggressors all continue to have the same profound meaning as when this cooperation was first established.
Canada being the first country to ratify Poland's membership of NATO, standing together, our troops stand together in Latvia at present. And as the Prime Minister alluded to a moment ago, Poland is absolutely essential to the defense of Ukraine.
Since 2015, Canada has trained 45,000 Ukrainian troops via Operation Unifier. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, much of that training has taken place in Poland. Poland is also Canada's largest trading partner in Central and Eastern Europe. In 2024 alone, Polish exports to Canada were worth nearly $2.3 billion and imports $1.8 billion. Now, following his visit to Poland, Prime Minister Mark Carney will be heading to Germany, where he will be meeting with business leaders and a German delegation. And then on Wednesday, he will be wrapping up his trip in Latvia. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya in Warsaw.
For nearly 4 years, Poland has been grappling with pressure on its eastern border with Belarus. Self-proclaimed President Alexander Lukashenko has been using migrants from the Middle East and Africa to destabilize Poland and the European Union. Now the Polish border guard is again reporting an uptick in the number of migrants trying to force their way in. Natalia Komarov reports.
A primeval forest, fields of wheat, seems peaceful, but the Polish-Belarusian border is anything but. Authorities reported 257 attempts to cross illegally into Poland on Friday, 219 on Saturday, and 341 on Sunday. These numbers are expected to rise.
In the coming days and weeks, we will certainly witness increased migratory pressure. The fall period is approaching, which has always favored greater intensity of illegal migration attempts orchestrated by Russian and Belarusian state security.
The Belarusian government began sending migrants to the EU's borders in 2021. On Sunday, The Insider, an exiled Russian media outlet which has been banned by the Kremlin, published what the site says is an anonymous confession from a Belarusian border guard.
We had an initial meeting point where we waited for people, usually somewhere about 500-600 meters from the border. The locations kept changing. Over the radio, we were given the coordinates of where to wait. Most often, small UAZ vehicles arrived, but sometimes it was entire buses. We loaded them into our vehicle, drove them to the border strip, and pointed the way with gestures, saying a few words like Europe, Germany, Merkel. None of us really knew English, and most of them didn't either.
In his confession, the former border guard says except for the regular set of rules, there were additional instructions signed personally by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko.
A couple of times we went to our unit commander and said, "Commander, we're breaking every rule we were taught, the entire manual, all 300 pages of it." The commander only pointed upward, saying the decisions were made from above. I didn't want to start a mutiny or openly voice my position. If my commander, a colonel, couldn't do anything, what could I do?
Minsk has repeatedly denied any involvement in human trafficking. Poland aims to become the EU leader in battling illegal migration. New legislation, which makes it significantly harder for people from outside the Schengen zone to obtain a Polish visa and find employment, was implemented in June of this year, and the government is already working on further legal measures.
Our legislation, like the Act on Foreigners and the Act on International Protection, was created in completely different circumstances and requires an urgent, complex update.
Polish uniformed services are bracing for a new wave of migrants, as indicated by the increased number of flights between Minsk and Libya's Benghazi, controlled by the Moscow-friendly strongman Khalifa Haftar. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
The trial of the crew of the Cook Islands flagged oil tanker Eagle S, which caused massive damage to underwater Baltic Sea infrastructure last year, has begun in Helsinki. 3 members of the crew are now facing serious allegations from Finnish prosecution. But is this an act of sabotage or simply a human error? Our reporter Anastasia Yanchenko was at the courthouse today and has the details.
3 crew members of the Eagle S oil tanker, 2 from Georgia and 1 from India, stand accused of damaging critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. In December last year, the tanker allegedly dragged its anchor for 90 kilometers across the seabed in the Gulf of Finland. The ship damaged 5 undersea cables between Finland and Estonia, including the Estlink 2 power link. Finnish officials boarded the vessel that evening, as prosecutors say the offense was committed in Finland's economic zone. The cost of the damage is estimated at around 60 million euros. Prosecutors allege the men committed aggravated criminal mischief and interfering with communication by targeting systems linked to the Finnish state. All 3 denied the charges.
I believe that process will be fair. This can be purely regarded as normal marine incident, and there is no crew involved in this for sabotage. I did my duty best. I'm second officer, having independent watch, navigation watch, and following protocols and procedures.
The main question before the court is whether the incident was an accident or deliberate act of sabotage. The defense is arguing that Finnish court does not have jurisdiction to hear the case, as they say the alleged offense did not occur in the Finnish waters. But the prosecution says the damage was deliberately intended to target Finland, and the Eagle S could have damaged more cables across the Baltic Sea if it weren't for the intervention by Finnish authorities.
We have a different kind of evidence, written evidence of the conditions of the ship, and then, of course, we will hear the defendants, and we have also heard expert witnesses during the investigation.
The tanker, which departed from a Russian port, is believed to be a part of Kremlin's shadow fleet, which Russia uses to evade oil sanctions, though no links to espionage or Kremlin were found on the board. There have been at least 11 similar cable damage incidents in the Baltic Sea in the past 15 months. The prosecution is demanding a minimum of 2 years and 6 months of imprisonment for 3 defendants. The hearings are scheduled to conclude in mid-September. In Helsinki, for TVP World, I'm Anastasia Yanchenko.
Scientists are sounding the alarm that the rapid rate of glacial melting in the Alps due to climate change may have a major impact on people's lives. Experts say that without replenishing effect of the ancient ice forms during long dry periods, it is now becoming apparent that water extraction and shipping traffic in Europe could be hit. John Todd has more.
Europe's glaciers make a majestic view, but one that's diminishing as they retreat.
8 jaar geleden was ik hier ook.
I was here 8 years ago too. Back then, the glacier was much bigger than it looks now. That's definitely climate change, yes. Glaciers are actually the source of many rivers that flow through Europe, including the Rhine. Glaciers provide water at a time when it is very dry downstream. They therefore compensate somewhat for the lack of precipitation. However, this role is slowly disappearing because the glaciers are getting smaller and smaller. We have calculated that if an extreme year such as 2003 and, for example, 2022 were to happen again in the future, that is, if the glaciers shrunk considerably, we could have 10 to 15% less water in the Rhine in the Netherlands in August. That may not sound like much, but during dry periods that figure can make a difference. It could cause us to fall just below the threshold value for shipping, for example. Climate change will indeed cause us to have more dry years in the future. At the same time, we know that the glaciers are retreating, so that creates a problem.
Scientists say this will create a double whammy and urge action to reduce rising global temperatures. John Todd for TVP World.
In his first month as Polish president, Karol Nawrocki vetoed a critical bill for Ukrainian refugees who fled the war to the safety of Poland. The new president wants to make certain that social benefits limited to those who work and pay taxes here in Poland. The veto also affects critical services that the Polish government provides for Kyiv, such as Starlink services for the Ukrainian armed forces, which is critical for the war effort. And now joining me to discuss this and other matters related to Ukraine is Roland Freudstein, co-founder of the Brussels Freedom Hub. Hello, sir, and thank you so much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Yes, now we're going to delve into kind of some domestic politics here first, because many in Poland are wondering about the outside view of Poland. And, you know, in your opinion, what do you think about the signal? What signal is sent that the Polish president, well, is saying to our international partners by vetoing this bill? Is Poland beginning to turn on Ukraine?
Well, I think, first of all, people are puzzled because, frankly speaking, most international observers do not know the domestic context and do not know how deeply split Poland is and how destructive the conflict between the president and the government has become. So people just don't know what to make of this. They have always considered Poland as a staunch supporter of Ukraine, and that goes from supporting refugees to arming the Ukrainian armed forces to supporting Ukraine's NATO membership and politically doing everything to help Ukraine against the Russian aggression. So, you know, but suddenly we have a situation where the Polish president seems to be more keen to impress his friends in the White House and the MAGA movement in Washington, and that creates some kind of cognitive dissonance, I'm afraid. People don't really know what to make of it. I mean, those who know Poland's domestic troubles, of course, can somehow explain this, but everybody thinks that this is a great pity.
Indeed. And, you know, how can Poland ask for the United States to do more, to support Ukraine, to change its tactics, and to use the stick against Vladimir Putin and Russia if the president is embracing the rising anti-Ukrainian sentiment here in Poland for domestic political gain?
Well, that question might be turned around and we might ask Poles themselves, right? So I really think that this is something up to Poles and Polish citizens to solve. There's nothing the rest of the world can do. You know, what should ideally happen is that Poland renews its unconditional support of the Ukrainian cause. And maybe it would be a good thing for the staunchest supporters of Ukraine in Poland itself to make more of a case that supporting Ukraine is a question of Polish national interest and not just, you know, the old Szlachta Polish nobility bonhomie and trying to shine the light of civilization into the borderlands. That's not the way to argue for support for Ukraine in the third decade of the 21st century. So, invoking Polish national interest and saying that if Ukraine loses this, if Ukraine becomes a Russian colony de facto, Poland will be next as a victim of aggression. And, that doesn't mean that Poland has to send forces immediately, like probably Britain, France, and Germany will do, and others. But Poland should more unequivocally support the cause of defending Ukraine.
Well, I'm gonna challenge you right there, because then again, as well, I'd say that this is on both sides of the aisle here. Should Poland be a part of the coalition of the willing in terms of sending troops? Poland wants to send, Poland plans on having the largest land army by the end of the decade. They're spending more than anybody is in terms of GDP per capita on, modernizing its army and on weapons and what have you. Maybe Poland, like Estonia, should send a few troops to Ukraine. And would this boost Poland's image abroad?
Absolutely. In an ideal world, you're absolutely right. This should be the case. Poland should send troops. Now, the fact that Poland right now is not committing any troops doesn't mean that it will never send any. But it certainly won't be among the first, and it won't be among the countries that send the highest amounts of troops. But we all have to recognize, and this is now up to Poland's friends and partners, we have to recognize that the current Polish government is probably the best we can get in terms of supporting Ukraine and in terms of being a cooperative, constructive partner in Europe. And the current Polish government feels that there are reasons why they cannot go all in. They cannot commit as many troops as Britain, France, Germany, and others. And Poland will definitely help Ukraine in other ways. So I think that Poland's partners should really take that into consideration and understand that the Polish government is in the situation it's in, got a hostile president of the state, and thereby has to somehow also take into consideration the part of the Polish population that is not exactly supporting this government, and that pertains to Ukraine as well.
Well, it seems that domestic politics and those considerations seem to be taking priority here. Now moving on, since Donald Trump has yet to put secondary sanctions on buyers of Russian oil, Zelensky has decided to on primary sanctions in the form of attacks on Russian oil terminals and refining capabilities. Now, according to Forbes, 1/3 of Russia's refining capacity has been taken down. Will this impact Russia's operations on the front line, in your opinion?
Well, in the mid and long term, yes, definitely. So it becomes more difficult to supply troops, to supply frontline units with gasoline and fuel. That's one thing. But the other effect is psychological on Russian citizens themselves. Up to today, for a middle class or rich Russian in the big cities, it was possible to pretend that this war is somehow not happening. It's some faraway thing, and the people who are dying are, in their vast majority, soldiers from ethnic areas, from rural areas, but not from the big cities and not from the Russian middle class. Now, if there are suddenly very long queues at gas stations, if gasoline prices skyrocket in Russia, that is a fantastic instrument to make it clear to the average Russian that, hey, you will not be untouched by this war of aggression that your president has started. So I think that there is a psychological and a political component here, which is as important as the military one, which is, of course, yes, negative and inhibiting Russian aggression at the front line.
All right. Well, with that, we've run out of time. Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of Brussels Freedom Hub, thank you so much for joining us tonight on World News Tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.